Hello, my little luxes. This is another episode of luxxxycharms, and I'm your host, cosplayer Charcy Lux. But today I am cosplaying as my original character. I am Crystal, the love demon. I am no longer that sweet Crystal that you remember from last year. I have morphed and transformed into Crystal, the anti-love demon. And welcome to another episode of luxxxycharms, where I am usually your host, cosplayer Charcy Lux. But she has left the building once more for me to take over so that I can give you this movie review of the 2005 film, Tamara. And everybody knows that February is that time of year when all the lovey-dovey, wubby couples get together so that they can celebrate on their silly little Valentine's holiday, the one day of the year that apparently they go on a date. But what do I know? But with this wonderful transformation, I am here to tell you this month's theme of Happy Vengeful Valentine's Day. So why yes, we are going to be focusing on horror films and stories that are about romantic tragedies that all come with a vengeance. So let's look at the revenge story of Tamara. As usual, spoiler alert, and viewer discretion is advised. The director of this film is Jeremy Haft, and writer is Jeffrey Reddick. You have Jenna Dewan as Tamara Riley, Katie Stuart as Chloe, Chad Faust as Jesse, Bryan Clark as Sean, Melissa Marie Elias as Keisha, Gil Hacohen as Patrick, Marc Devigne as Roger, Matthew Marsden as Bill Natoli, Claudette Mink as Allison Natoli, and Chris Sigurdsson as Mr. Riley. And as usual, I apologize if I mispronounced anyone's name. I will start off with the very easy short plot synopsis on IMDb. Tamara, an unattractive girl who is picked on by her peers, returns after her death as a sexy seductress to extract revenge. Picture yourself. You are a beautiful young girl, just ripe of the age of 17. You are a senior in high school, and you are slowly sauntering and walking down the school hallway as you are making your way to your English class. But before you enter into the room, you make a slow, shy little glance back behind you in the hallway. As you walk into the room, you head in the direction of your tall, handsome English teacher, who has always been very welcoming and supportive of you and your talents. And as an act of appreciation, you give him a gift. The next thing you know, the man sweeps you off your feet, and before you know it, you are making out with your hot teacher on his desk. But the moment doesn't last long, for it is rudely interrupted by obnoxious laughter coming from the hallway. You have been caught by your fellow peers, and they are watching you from the window and pointing and laughing at you. Mortified, you try to get away from the teacher. But at the same time, you notice that the laughter starts to pan, and now it is in the classroom with you, and you find that you have had a room full of classmates the whole entire time watching you. But somehow, your beautiful looks have all of a sudden vanished, and now you look like a tired, disheveled teenage girl. Feeling embarrassed and mortified, you let out a scream to let it all stop, only to finally wake up and realize that it was all just a terrible nightmare.
You okay?
This is how we are introduced to Tamara's character in the film. We find out that she is a very shy, nervous, nerdy bookworm who is consistently picked on by her fellow peers.
Journey into witchcraft. I think you've already made that journey. I gotta say, it looks like you've had a really rough trip.
We're given very small hints at the fact that she's technically an attractive girl, especially with the opening scene, but we are led to believe, because of how she looks at this moment, that she's an unattractive person, an unattractive girl. And the fact that even in the tiny plot summary that's on IMDb, they even say she's an unattractive girl. But because of the way she dresses and her mannerisms, she comes off as if she is an ugly duckling. We very quickly learn that she is madly in love with her English teacher, Mr. Natoli. And he's the one person who keeps encouraging her and sees that she's got a knack and a talent for writing. That he even takes one of her class essays and sends it to the local newspaper, which this essay was all about exposing the local football team at the high school and exposing the fact that some of the teens were using steroids to enhance their athletic abilities and performances. Well, because of her essay being in the paper, the team's coach and the principal of the school decide that they're going to conduct physicals and tests on these football players to see if they are using steroids to enhance their abilities. Apparently, they were planning on doing this for months beforehand, but Tamara's article ended up speeding up the process, so they knew they had to do the testing. Well, in response, you have a fellow peer, a fellow classmate of Tamara's by the name of Sean, who's on the football team. He refuses to take the test, so he is cut from the team. Well, you come to find out he refused to take the test because he indeed was using steroids. Well, what does a typical bully end up doing? He decides he's going to blame Tamara for the fact he was cut from the team. Not for his own actions. Obviously, we can never do that. So he fully blames Tamara. So Sean and his friends decide to concoct this idea of getting even with Tamara, and they decide that they're going to pull this terrible prank on her.
You know, I think it's time we teach that loser a lesson.
Unfortunately, the prank goes horribly wrong, as they always do, and poor Tamara is accidentally killed in the altercation of this terrible prank. But Tamara is a witch, and earlier in that day, she had recited a spell, a love spell that she had for Mr. Natoli, and this spell brought her back to life.
It's a spell.
Note that I had compared Tamara to an ugly duckling before. Now, what happens with ugly ducklings? They grow up and become beautiful swans. Now, Tamara's transformation isn't a beautiful swan, but she becomes a gorgeous siren. A very vengeful, gorgeous siren.
And what we did afterwards was inexcusable.
I don't want excuses.
What do you want?
You'll see.
She has now gained brand new powers and abilities, and she uses them to extract her revenge and to remove her enemies. And with a single touch, she can turn those against her into mindless minions to do her bidding, and they are powerless to do anything against her. But even as she's slowly making her way, picking off her enemies one by one, she's still continually trying to gain the love and affections of her beloved teacher, Mr. Natoli. Now, the base plotline of this movie is the whole idea that everyone, every person is capable of great acts of good and evil.
The theme of duality. The idea that each of us is capable of great acts of good or evil has been with us forever.
We very early on are introduced to the fact that Tamara is open to the fact of evil acts. Because in the opening credit scenes, we see her use witchcraft as a power to put a hex on Mrs. Natoli. And this hex is very direct, and it makes her sterile, so that she cannot have children with her husband, Mr. Natoli. And since obviously Tamara is in love with this man, she thinks that if she makes this woman sterile, that he will not want to stay with her.
How'd you know about mine and Allison's personal problems?
You two are having problems?
Play games with me. How'd you know? What's come over you?
You have.
Stop it!
We learn throughout the film that this young couple has had several miscarriages, and it has put a strain on the couple. So even before Tamara becomes a supernatural siren, she still has enough power in witchcraft that she can still put hexes out on other people. And also remember that she is willing to do this. So when she becomes a spiteful siren, she is more than willing to do anything to gain the love and attention from Mr. Natali. Through Tamara, we find out just how evil one person is willing to go in order to seek revenge, and also just how low she is willing to go in order to get the love of her life. We are reminded that Tamara had the capability of great good, but she chose a path of evil, hate, and violence instead. I won't be giving away the ending to this film, but you can just imagine how this tragic story ends. After Tamara's transformation, we are shown that she is constantly wearing the color red. I feel like this was done intentionally to show her newfound power, because for the color red, it usually tends to symbolize love, passion, beauty, and power.
Sorry I'm late. Rough weekend. I almost died getting here.
Well, you'll have to take a makeup test.
Okay.
But we are constantly reminded throughout Tamara that we are always looking at two sides of a coin, that it is always a constant battle between good and evil. So on the positive sides, on the symbolism of red, you also have negative words that represent red, which are anger, hate, and aggression. So we're always given little hints of symbolism throughout the film. So Tamara's not the only film that has used the color red as symbolism. I also remember from the film The Sixth Sense that they also used red when they were directing your attention to strange things happening to the boy. So very powerful symbolism is with the color red. While you're at Tamara's house, you will see several different photos of her character with her mother on the wall. These were real photos from Jenna Dewan's childhood, so they are actual photos of her and her mother that they used for the film. And Jenna Dewan also talked about how much she hated the high heels she had to wear in this film, and that they were super uncomfortable to wear and painful to walk in. And after knowing that fact and kind of rewatching the film and everything, I can tell that her little slow saunters has an uncomfortable movement to it. So I can just imagine how many takes they had to do just because she was in so much pain walking around in those heels. In fact, I think she had even suggested if she could walk around barefoot instead. But that for the idea of the story in that, she was told she had to keep wearing the high-heeled shoes. And Gil Hacohen, who played the character of Patrick, ad-libbed the line of trailer park whore when he was just spewing slander at Tamara while they were at the high school.
I'll see you soon, you trailer trash whore.
Now, writer Jeffrey Reddick did not write that in his original script. Like I said, it was ad-libbed in, because Jeffrey himself had grown up in a trailer park, and also the idea that Tamara's character did not live in a trailer herself. I do like the idea that they left this impromptu line in the film though, because it is so true to life, that when people are just yelling out and spewing horrible, terrible things at people that they are being cruel and mean to, it doesn't mean that it's always a true fact. It's just people yelling out spews just to hurt somebody for the sake of hurting them. All in all, I greatly love this film. Yes, there are a lot of thoughts and opinions on this one. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is it the best film ever? No. In fact, if I were to give it an honest rating, I would give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It has a lot of goofs, and it is a bit choppy throughout the film. But still, I fell in love with this film a long time ago. So I have a different kind of appreciation for it. I fell in love with it when it originally came out, and I first saw it when I was still in high school. And for the fact that I was an unpopular, awkward, and bullied teen myself, I found empowerment while watching this film. The nerdy underdog finally had gained power, beauty, and bravery to finally take on and go up against the bullies who had harmed her. So because of this, I have this great appreciation because, like I said, it gave me that feeling of empowerment that finally, the underdog could stand up to their enemies. Nowadays, this is one of my favorite comfort films. I like to put it on as a background noise, especially if I'm cleaning or if I'm working on an art project or something like that. It's just perfect to have on because it's a comfort film for me. Now, it was definitely interesting watching this film here recently with my friend Joel and getting his perspective because he can pick apart a film pretty relentlessly sometimes. So it was interesting hearing his thoughts and the fact that because Tamara, with a touch, she could control people. She could turn them into her minions and they would have to do her bidding. Now, he had flat out said he wished that these characters, in their acting and everything, that when they were touched by her, that maybe there was an internal struggle that they should have been showing on screen for us to kind of see, to be along for the journey. That they're not just, boom, mindless puppets. So his thought process was, we would see in their eyes, we would see this horror, this struggle that they were trying to fight and resist this control that Tamara had over them, but that they were losing. And what's interesting is that I'd never thought about it before in that type of idea or perspective. I had always just kind of assumed that with a touch that they were literally powerless to even fight it, to even struggle against it. But it is an interesting idea to think, like, what would have happened if they did use this type of idea? What if we would have seen them trying to fight the fact that they wanted to not do what they were doing, and that maybe we could even see fear behind their eyes because they were powerless to stop their actions and they literally had no control anymore. Lastly, I wanted to bring up and talk about Chloe's character.
Drug-sniffing dogs is off its leash again.
Back off.
Mind your own business.
I'm making this my business.
Now, Chloe's character is one of my favorites in the film, and she has always been my favorite. But going into it with a fresh perspective here recently, I had noticed something odd about her. Something that kind of had unsettled me that I had never noticed from the previous times I had watched it. And that by the end of the film, she seems kind of like a drone. Like she has no emotions, that there's no feelings or emphasis behind her words. It's just kind of like a blank stare when it came to everything. And I'd be interested to know if that was a director's choice or if it was just her acting. But I loved and adored her character because she was always the person that fought for what was right. She was the person that always stood up for Tamara.
Well, you guys really should give Tamara a break. She's a really cool girl.
Yeah.
She was always the one who was kind-hearted and always defended against the bullies. So by the end of the film, watching this type of perspective of her, and it's like, did I always just have rose-colored glasses because I adored her for the fact that she always stood up for what was right, that I didn't notice this the previous times I had watched it? She literally has no emotions by the end of this film. And there's a lot going on and a lot of tragedy happening where it's like, what is going on here? So like I said, I'm wondering if it's something that was directed to her, that she was supposed to be so numb to everything going on around her that she just was a blank slate. I really don't know. It was kind of odd. So just kind of a forewarning and a heads up about that. It could have been bad acting as well, but I personally don't feel like Katie Stewart was a bad actress. Like I said, I really would be intrigued to know what exactly was the idea behind it, because the amount of actions and emotions going on around her and tragedies happening, I would have figured that she'd be in fight or flight mode, but I don't know. If you've seen the film, I would love to know your thoughts on that perspective as well. But even with all its little quirks and problems that it had, I still greatly love this film. It's a nostalgic one for me. Although I'd like to know where their setting was taking place for this one, because like I said, this came out around 2005. And by the 90s and early 2000s, most classrooms were replacing their chalkboards with the whiteboards and markers. And this film still had a chalkboard. And in fact, my friend Bryan even brought up the fact that their desks looked like something that came from the 1970s. I don't know if it was just like a setting that was set up and that they could just go into this building and use it. I mean, that would make sense. And it'd be low budget since it was all old equipment and everything. And we can also do our usual joke when it comes to horror films and the fact that all the high schoolers are played by people in their 20s and 30s. So it's really not a wonder that when I was at the age of 16, people thought I was 12. That's because they were constantly seeing people who were supposed to be high schoolers were portrayed by 20-year-olds. Of course I'm gonna look younger than what I am. But anyway, like I said before, despite all the silliness, despite all the quirks in this film, yes, I love this one. It will always be a comfort film for me. Let me know, have you seen this one before? What do you think of it? And if you haven't seen it, I definitely hope and wish that you give it a chance and check it out. Now, please do not go into it thinking this is a big blockbuster, that this is a sensational film. No, view this as just a nice horror film for entertainment purposes. But it also tells a decent morale story of good and evil.
Now, many people believe there is a devil or evil force out there tempting us to do bad things. Others believe the potential lies solely within each one of us.
But thank you so much for joining me once again on another luxxxycharms. Thank you for letting me be the weird little anti-love demon crystal once again. Obviously, I do not look the same as I did last year. Put a little time and effort into the costume. Not that I don't do that per usual anyway, but if you would like to follow me on my other YouTube channel, please come join me for Scary Stories My Father Told Me. And I have several other social media outlets that I would love for you to come and join me there as well. And if you would like to show just a little bit more support that helps me out greatly, please come join me on my Patreon. And on the screen, you can see a shout out to my fellow Patreon members. And thank you so much for joining me on there. And Crystal is the afterlife of the party. But I would love for you to come and join me here in the afterlife of the party. And remember to slay, subscribe, like, and always be yourself. And remember to love yourself. Even during this anti-love time of the year, and we're celebrating Happy Vengeful Valentine's Day, always remember to still love you and the you for who you are. Because self-love is the best love you can give yourself. And also remember that all people have the capability of great acts of good or evil, but it's up to you to make the right choice. Until next time, my little Luxes, I hope you have a luxxxycharms kind of day. Bye!